Now, in the latest from the Israel-Hamas conflict, Israeli forces killed dozens of gunmen in Gaza's southern hub city of Khan Yunis over the last 24 hours. The operation included an airstrike by IDF troops on a Hamas arms cache that set off secondary explosions. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to continue the offensive until total victory against Hamas after it attacked Israel on October the 7th last year. The UN Security Council will vote on a new draft resolution on Tuesday calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The resolution was drafted by the United States, calling for a temporary ceasefire and warned Israel not to launch a ground offensive in Rafah. The draft document was prepared by Algeria more than 2 weeks ago. The US, Egypt, Israel and Qatar have held negotiations on a potential Israel-Hamas truce and the exchange of captives held by Hamas. Meanwhile, the United Nations has allocated $100 million to boost poorly funded humanitarian crises. The United Nations said the funding drawn from the United Nations Central Emergency Response Fund is to support humanitarian crises in 7 countries, including the Democratic Republic of Congo, Sudan and Syria. As the decreased funding for the CERF in 2023 was the lowest level since 2018, and the dire reality that donor funding is not keeping up with the rapidly rising demands for humanitarian needs. On to Europe now. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange begins his final legal battle in the London High Court today to avoid being extradited to the United States. My colleague Stuart Smith is in London. He gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Stuart, Assange's wife Stella last week described this hearing as a matter of life and death for Assange.
Yes, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has embarked on what could be potentially his final opportunity to halt his extradition from Britain to the United States following over 13 years of legal battles in English courts. His lawyers will try to overturn a 2021 judgment by a British court that approved Assange's extradition to the US. Washington aims to bring Assange to trial on 18 charges linked to WikiLeaks' significant disclosure of confidential US military documents and diplomatic cables. DD India's John Beaver joins us live from Bristol. John, the hearing has been going on for an hour now and is due to run until Wednesday. What's at stake for Julian Assange if this appeal doesn't go his way?
Well, it's absolutely crucial for Julian Assange, if he wants to stay in the UK, that this appeal, as you say, goes his way. And this really is the culmination of more than 13 years of legal wranglings. Remember, of course, it was back in 2010 and 2011 that WikiLeaks leaked hundreds of thousands of classified documents. So Julian Assange's legal team are really pinning their hopes on this hearing going their way. They do have one final card they can play if things don't work out for them the way they want. They could go to an even higher court in Europe, but they would need to be quick doing that, because if this doesn't go their way, then in theory Julian Assange could be extradited to the UK, from the UK to the US very quickly indeed. What we've been hearing from court this morning from Julian Assange's legal team is that this is a politically motivated extradition, and that the US is trying to get him in front of a court in the US because they are embarrassed about this leak, that there was this leak exposed wrongdoing and in fact illegality by the US. So his legal team are trying to say that this extradition is politically motivated. They've looked at other similar cases that have happened in the past in the UK where extradition has been blocked because it has been judged to have been for political reasons. So that's the argument his legal team are using. As you say, the hearing is taking place today, and we should have an answer tomorrow that might bring an end to this long-running trial.
John Beaver there in Bristol, England. The European Union is aiming to get its 13th package of sanctions against Russia over the line by the 2-year anniversary of the full-scale offensive in Ukraine. The 27 European Union foreign ministers discussed the conflict in Brussels on Monday. 26 of the 27 member countries joined in support of the sanctions. It would complement a €50 billion financial support package for Kiev and a move to set aside profits from Russia's immobilized sovereign assets. Hungary remained the sole skeptic, which said imposing more European Union sanctions only hurts the bloc's economy. The EU foreign ministers also reiterated their calls for ceasefire in the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict.
The 26 expressed its support to this statement and produced a new one, which is basically the same one that I issued during the weekend, but with an additional statement, additional paragraph, which is to require an immediate humanitarian pause that would lead to a sustainable ceasefire, to the unconditional release of hostages, and to the provision of humanitarian assistance.
The Ukrainian military has bolstered defences near the city of Avdiivka, which is now under Russian control. Ukraine's military commander has said the troops are taking up new defensive positions in the east in order to repel Russia's offensive. Meanwhile, Sweden has approved its 15th and largest military aid package to Ukraine, worth $682 million. This latest one includes maritime assault vessels and underwater arms, such as mines and subsea drones. Russia's Federal Security Service has detained a woman with dual Russian-US citizenship in the city of Yekaterinburg. The arrest was made on suspicion of treason for raising funds for Ukraine's armed forces. The Los Angeles resident was allegedly collecting funds for a Ukrainian organization whose ultimate beneficiary was the Ukrainian army. It's not yet clear how she's pleading. The Kremlin says Russian President Vladimir Putin hasn't seen late opposition leader Alexei Navalny's wife's video statement claiming that her husband was poisoned. Russia's Dmitry Peskov chose not to comment on Yulia Navalnaya's claim, given that she had recently been widowed. Peskov, however, emphasized that allegations blaming Putin for Navalny's death were absolutely unfounded and obnoxious. Former US President Donald Trump has made his first public comment on the death of Russia's most prominent opposition leader, Alexei Navalny. In a social media post, Trump compared his alleged political troubles with Navalny's mysterious death and said Navalny's sudden death has made him more aware of what's happening in the United States. Earlier, President Joe Biden directly blamed Putin for Navalny's death in a penal colony north of the Arctic Circle. Farmers in various parts of Europe have escalated their agitation against EU policies, rising costs and competition from abroad. In Poland, farmers are planning to block all border crossings with Ukraine from today. Protests were also held in Prague, in the Czech Republic and in Athens. DD India's Ishan Garg has more from Brussels.
Well, the governments are finding it incredibly difficult to deal with these issues, not only because it's a problem in terms of supply of agricultural goods, or in the case of Ukraine, as it says, supply of essential items which could hurt its defenses. It's also a very complicated problem because various farmers in different parts of Europe are not only protesting EU-wide agricultural laws, they also seem to be protesting laws which are specific to their own countries, but they are finding common ground in the argument that some of the EU's laws have made it difficult for farmers to hit their profit margins. They have said that particularly imports coming in from Ukraine have the potential to flood the European markets, which would mean that profits for the farmers, especially in countries like Poland, they're going to take a massive hit. And because of that, they have launched this massive protest, which is expected to last for another 3 weeks at the very least. We are seeing a massive backlog, a massive hold-up on the borders, on the Polish-Ukrainian borders. It's unclear what the governments can do, but they have held several rounds of meetings, especially the Ukrainian officials and the Polish officials, but so far it seems that they have not been able to reach an agreement on what to do. EU's position has been to provide more help to the farmers. It has already announced that it's going to cut its limit of pesticides by 50% to help the farmers. It's also watered down some of its climate change ambitions to suit the farmers. And now we are also hearing that the European Union is looking to put a sort of hard stop, a braking mechanism on the imports coming in from Ukraine. And this is all an attempt to assuage the concerns of the farmers ahead of the EU elections, which are coming up later in June. But at the same time, many farming organizations have said that these are not the measures that have completely helped them to the degree that they would have wanted, and they are seeking more support from the EU. And the problem now for the Commission here is that they are looking to support the Ukrainian farmers as well.
Australia said on Tuesday it would add another $7.25 billion to defence over the next decade. The additional funding will put emphasis on accelerated delivery of the Navy's future surface combatant fleet. The Navy will also expand its fleet of warships from 11 to 26 vessels, the largest since the end of the Second World War. That's it from me here in London. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Stuart Smith joining us all from London. You're watching DD India Global. Still to come on this show. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi unveils multiple development projects in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Over 1,600 South Korean trainee doctors stage a walkout in protest against government reforms.
साइड आपकी कंपनी से फोन लिया था, ये ऑन नहीं हो रहा है।
गलती से मिस्टेक। आप एक काम कीजिए, अपना अकाउंट नंबर भेजिए, पैसा आपके अकाउंट में रिफंड हो जाएगा।
अभी भेजता हूँ सिस्टर। भाई साहब, यूपीआई कहता है किसी भी कंपनी से संपर्क करना हो तो उनके आधिकारिक वेबसाइट पे जाइए और करिए। अपने पैसों का ख्याल खुद रखिए, इनका मैं रखता हूँ। लाओ फोन रख वरना आंखें निकाल कर।
आप भी ये जानकारी शेयर करें और अपने आस पास के भोले को बचाएं।
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. Back to Asia now. South Korea's healthcare sector took a hit on Tuesday as more than 1,600 trainee doctors in major hospitals staged a walkout to protest against a government plan to admit more students to the medical schools. About 6,400 of the 13,000 doctors and interns at large hospitals handed in their resignations, and some 1,630 walked out on Monday night. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo ordered emergency measures such as the use of telemedicine, more operations at public hospitals, and the opening up of military clinics.
Even if the medical school quota is increased, there is so much for all of you to do when you think about the growing demand for medical care in the future. Again, I urge you to return to your positions and work together to solve the issues in the field.
Tensions continue to rise across the sensitive Taiwan Strait as China increases patrolling following fishermen's death there. China's Coast Guard triggered panic among Taiwanese people by boarding a Taiwanese tourist boat. This is part of Beijing's plans to set up law enforcement activity around the Taiwan-controlled islands of Kinmen. This comes following the death of two Chinese nationals fleeing Taiwan's Coast Guard, having entered into waters too close to Kinmen. However, the head of Taiwan's Ocean Affairs Council has said that it was common for Chinese and Taiwanese tourist boats to accidentally enter the other side's waters.
When Chinese boats cross into our waters, we know that these boats are not illegal at all and they just entered by accident. We would just broadcast warnings and hope they leave immediately. So we think boating and inspecting our boat yesterday has harmed our people's feelings and triggered people's panic. It was also not in line with the interest of the people across the strait. In view of peace and goodwill between the two sides of the strait, We express regret over Chinese boarding and inspecting the boat.
As India's national capital gears up to host the Raisina dialogue from February 21st to 23rd, leaders have started arriving to attend the event. Sweden's Foreign Minister Tobias Billström arrived in India on Tuesday to attend the event, while Latvia's Foreign Minister Krišjānis Kariņš also reached New Delhi to attend the Raisina dialogue. Earlier, Greece's Foreign Minister Georgios Gerapetritis also arrived in India early on Tuesday for the annual Raisina dialogue. Now, the second CII, Confederation of Indian Industries, India-Europe Business and Sustainability Conclave kick-started in New Delhi today. This two-day conclave aims at putting forward the business perspectives and priorities and deliberating on the opportunities and challenges for businesses in India and Europe. The conclave holds great importance for both the countries, as Europe is India's second largest trading partner and solely contributes 21.8% share in India's total exports. Bilateral trade between India and Europe in 2022-23 has been a little above $185 billion. India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, will also address the event later this evening. The event was addressed by Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Hellenic Republic. He called for further strengthening business ties between India and Greece.
It is our aspiration that this gathering will facilitate the exchange of business perspectives and priorities, while also fostering deliberations on the opportunities and challenges that confront businesses in both India and Europe. In this context, I'm very pleased to begin a collaborative partnership between Greece and India. Our countries have a long history of friendship and cooperation, and it is crucial that we enhance our economic connections. As both of our nations are maritime countries, I believe we all recognize the significance of strengthening our economic cooperation, particularly in the maritime and blue economy sectors.
On to the northern part of India now. Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Jammu in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Prime Minister Modi laid the foundation stones of multiple development projects worth around $4 billion in Jammu. The projects relate to several sectors including health, education, rail, road, aviation, petroleum, civic infrastructure, among others. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also dedicated to the nation various rail projects in Jammu and Kashmir, including the new rail line between Banihal Khari Sumber Sangaldan and newly electrified Baramulla Srinagar Banihal Sangaldan section. He also flagged off the first electric train in the valley and also the train service between Sangaldan station and the Baramulla station. The Prime Minister also distributed appointment letters to about 1,500 new government recruits of Jammu and Kashmir. The Indian Prime Minister also interacted with beneficiaries of various government schemes as part of the campaign Viksit Bharat Viksit Jammu program in Jammu. Now, addressing the public gathering in Jammu, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said, "The love of the people of Kashmir is a great blessing for them."
सिर्फ अपने परिवार की सोचने वाले लोग कभी आपके परिवार की चिंता नहीं करेंगे। मुझे संतोष है कि जम्मू कश्मीर को इस परिवारवादी राजनीति से मुक्ति मिल रही है। भाई और बहनों, जम्मू कश्मीर को विकसित बनाने के लिए हमारी सरकार गरीब, किसान, युवा शक्ति और नारी शक्ति पर सबसे ज्यादा फोकस कर रही है।
India has contributed an additional $1 million to the IBSA fund, bolstering South-South cooperation. This is in reaffirmation of the principle development of the people, by the people and for the people. IPSA is a joint body of India, Brazil and South African nation for Poverty and Hunger Alleviation Fund. Each of the country contributes $1 million annually to the IPSA fund in spirit of partnership, support for global South nations. With the additional fund, India's contribution to IPSA has now crossed $18 million since the fund was set up in 2004. The IPSA fund supports the projects that are concrete expressions of solidarity. IPSA is focused on food security, health intervention, safe drinking water, among others. The contribution presented to the Director of the UN Office of South-South Cooperation today underscores India's commitment to collaborative progress and shared prosperity. Today, the UN marks the World Day of Social Justice, highlighting the urgent need for global collaboration to bridge divides and build alliances as inequalities over the world worsen. DD India's Jessica Taneja has more.
Despite a seemingly resilient 2023 labour market, the United Nations painted a grim picture today on World Day of Social Justice. The spectre of instability, economic woes and climate change looms large, threatening to derail progress and widen the chasm of inequality, leaving millions behind. While the global job market showed no signs of recovery last year, millions are still falling further behind. An extra 2 million job seekers will flood the market in 2024, pushing global unemployment up from 5.1% to 5.2%. The picture worsens when we zoom in. 241 million workers still fight extreme poverty, and 423 million grapple with moderate poverty, struggling to make ends meet. The UN's message is stark and clear. Solutions require a multidimensional approach. Governments must join hands in strengthening domestic economies and fostering regional collaboration. While World Day of Social Justice serves as a powerful reminder, the fractured social contract needs mending. Moreover, education, the cornerstone of individual empowerment and societal development, needs to be prioritized even more. Jessica Taneja for DD India.
And we now take a look at other stories making news around the world. A cold wave swept through central and eastern China on Tuesday. Snowfall and icy roads forced the closure of at least 50 road sections and 527 expressway toll gates in the region. China's weather authorities have raised the orange alert for the cold wave, which is forecast to continue in the region this week. Japan's capital Tokyo experienced unusually warm weather on Tuesday, recording a high of 23.7 degrees Celsius. Early cherry blossoms were also sighted. But temperatures in Tokyo are forecast to plunge rapidly later in the week. Drawing inspiration from termites, a Swedish lecturer in architecture is collecting samples from termite tunnels in a bid to design power-conserving buildings with temperature and humidity control systems. Termites are naturally able to influence airflow and humidity inside their nests in arid environments. Dubai-based action board company SWS Board Technology is promising greener production by utilizing solar power for their manufacturing process. The company is powering up to 95.4% of the factory's clean energy needs. SWS exports 500,000 boards per year to the world, constituting a third of the world's snowboards and half of the world's kiteboards. Asia's most significant aerospace exhibition, the Singapore Air Show, is featuring flying displays of military aircraft from Singapore, Australia, India, Indonesia, South Korea and the United States. India's Sarang team is also performing a 4-helicopter display. More than 1,000 companies from more than 50 countries are participating in the Singapore Air Show. So that's it in this edition of DD India Global. Do join us for another edition of the show at 7:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter and Instagram at DD India Live. Also find us online at ddindia.co.in. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I am Tanvi Taneja From my entire team in New Delhi, thank you for watching. Namaskar.